But before I do that, I want to talk to you. Okay. And I want to talk to you about your career. I want to hear how you got started in acting. And I want to hear more about how you feel that it's changed in recent years.
Yeah. So go for it.
Go for it.
So I saw how I became an actress was my mom as a child, like 2, took me to the movie Aliens with Sigourney Weaver.
Yes.
And that changed my entire psyche on life. And she like really pumped it up. Like, you're going to watch a movie about a woman who can do anything. I'm like, yeah, you know? And then I related so much because we lived in Japan. I felt really isolated and probably in outer space in many ways. And so I was like, this is what I want to do. This is I'm going to be Sigourney Weaver. Unfortunately, I never really got to play a role that was comparable to Sigourney Weaver, but that's how I started off. And you know, when people tell these stories, it's often really boring. So I'm going to skip to the part where I got to Hollywood.
Yeah.
Okay. So Hollywood, I think I was 18 years old. I can't imagine letting my child move out.
Just go to Hollywood.
They're like, go
Was
for
acting
it.
what you always wanted to do throughout your whole childhood?
Yeah.
Okay. And did your parents feel reluctant about that?
Not at all. They were so, this is what you're going to do. Yes, we totally support you.
Okay. Some people are cautious about that because, especially the way Hollywood is now, but it's always had corruption.
Right.
And
I don't think they were aware of that. You know, I don't think they knew. I think we were all just super naive. I did have an uncle who was in the industry, and he set me up with a meeting with the casting director to dissuade me from coming. And so I sat with her, and she's like, "It's the worst industry. You're probably not going to make it. It's so hard to break through. You should probably go home." And I honestly, my mom relayed me what she had said because I didn't hear any of this because it was like one of those. Oh, you're saying I have a chance. You know.
So you're saying there's a chance.
Yeah. So that was sort of the threshold that I crossed to get in there. And then it was like, you know, when you're a kid and you've got a dream, like, reality doesn't exist. You're like, I'm going to make this happen. There's no such thing as a roadblock. I'm just going to freaking go for it. And I had gone to U of A for a year as almost a theater major. You can't be in freshman, but I was giving myself 4 years. I was like, if you go to college, you put X amount of time investment into what you're going to be. I'm going to put this length of time. I actually gave myself 9 months, but that's how I looked at the investment into Hollywood. Like, you're going to put effort in, and everyone says, like, you just go to as many auditions as you can. You fail like 99% of them, and then one will hit. It's like a lottery, and you never know which one it's going to be.
I think that's one of the things that people don't give actors enough credit for is they have to learn to take a lot of rejection. It's a very, very hard thing to go to. I mean, it would be akin to just going to endless job interviews all the time.
Yeah.
And it only works so often.
Yeah. And you totally get used to. I mean, it's not that it's not disappointing, but it's part of the job. And so you develop a thick skin in that respect.
Do you think that's gone away? Do you think we're in an age now where they have less? Maybe they have a thicker skin. Maybe when it comes to the professional side of it, but then you hear them arguing with people on the internet, and they can't stand criticism of their work.
Yeah, Tara Manning actually just posted about. Did you see that?
No, but I love her work too.
Yeah, so she's awesome. She just posted a thing about how we're supposed to be actors. We're supposed to show up on our mark and say our lines, not stand around and talk about social justice issues and political.
I'm sure they did not like that.
I don't know who she was talking about, but I was like, yes. But that wasn't how it was back then, but the arrogance was still there, but there was nowhere to direct it. So it was just like nebulous narcissism.
There was no platform for it back then.
Yeah.
Social media's made that worse for everybody.
Everyone.
Now,
I mean, and Warhol said, everyone's going to get their 15 minutes fame. This is like a fire hose of attention on people all the time.
And it's also interesting too because it ends up affecting the bottom line of the studios. I remember Chris Gore said something where he said the first thing I would do if I was producing a movie right now is I'd say to any actor I hired, I need the passwords to your social media. You're not going to be posting a bunch of insane stuff. Like there's going to be rules and regulations for how you act online, and that seems to be less common these days. People, we're going to be talking in a little bit about the director of Cleopatra, basically talking about. I sent you that, right? Like, okay, she basically is like, they're arguing with people about this stuff online, and I'm like, why? Like, it does no one. Yep, you'll get used to it. It does no one any good.
We've got a super chat from Clef the Misfit that says, has Samaire reached out to the Daily Wire about being in one of their projects? Maybe she could be their first breakout star in a Sigourney Weaver level role. Who knows?
There you go.
Have
childhood
you reached out?
Realize.
No, yes, actually I was in Terror on the Prairie with Gina Carano. I was asked to audition for Shut In, but at the time, which was his first project when Daily Wire sort of came to be, I read the script and it was about a girl who was locked in a pantry and, you know, with a drug addiction. And I didn't realize the metaphor that they were making, which was we just went in and we're locked in our houses forever, and we were told we were not allowed to leave unless we got injected, essentially. At the time, I was like, I can't portray. I feel so claustrophobic in life and what's happening, what's going on. I can't mentally go there right
can't
now.
Access it right
yeah,
now.
And I really wish I had, because you know I see the parallel to the message, and I love stories with messages that you secretly like sort of dipped in there. So yes, I have worked with them. I did the Terror on the Prairie, and I will continue to work with them on further projects.
Cool.
I was talking to them earlier, to Mark and Tim earlier, and Mark had done a video in the past where he talked about how wokeness, especially in a lot of ways, it's steeped in nihilism, in an anti-human sentiment. And my point was that given that Hollywood has dove headfirst into this ideology, especially within their messaging, does that make Hollywood complicit with that type of anti-human, almost nihilistic worldview?
Absolutely. And it's such a juvenile perception on life. Like when I was a kid, I was a complete nihilist because I heard that one day the earth was going to be swallowed by the sun. And it was like, well, then what's the point? And from there, that was my view of the world. But like as I evolved as a human being, I found purpose and drive to be alive and participate in this life. And so basically this whole industry is saying, F it, and like, we're gonna help it come down. And so yes, it's complicit. And this is the other thing I wanna say that's so important. Our side has no cultural relevance in the film and television industry. And people spend so much money on talking head politicians who do nothing to fight the war that actually needs to be fought in the psyche of our cultural consciousness, which right now isn't happening. I mean, we have you guys, thank God, but we don't really have storytelling unless it's the Daily Wire. And we really need to push out more content to create the shift of reality, because that's all we're working in here.
They don't realize how important art is to moving the needle as far as what people are going to believe.
The war we're fighting is a cultural war.
Carl, I would say cultural and spiritual in a lot of ways. Like you were saying earlier, you just said like you were nihilistic in your youth, and a lot of us were. And a lot of that people, it kind of comes through atheism. Like everyone has their edgy atheist phase.
Right.
Mary won't have an edgy atheist phase.
I have an edgy Catholic phase.
Yeah, she's in her edgy Catholic phase right now.
But it's lifelong.
Yeah, like, but there's everyone has that, you know, that point where we talk a lot about how it's like just because it seems nihilistic, that they think that means it's deep. And that doesn't necessarily make it deep.
Right.
And that's in so much media right now. Yeah. All of the scripts in Hollywood right now are exactly that.
It's like a variation on goth. It's just a character.
Hollywood is not its hot topic phase.
Right? Yes, absolutely. But you're right. Once you find your higher power, your God, or whatever it is, that's when you have that shift to like being present and then contributing to what's going on versus just destroying it.
So you've spoken out now, and you ran for mayor.
Yeah.
You ran for mayor. Do you get do people reach out to you in private and say that they liked what you're doing, but they can't talk about it out loud?
From Hollywood, especially, yes.
That is one of the most concerning aspects of this to me, because I feel like beyond just creating the culture, beyond just creating the art, we need to create a culture where people feel comfortable coming out and having these discussions in a way that says, I might not agree with you, but we can have this discussion without demonizing one another.
Well, I think the segue is humor, because that's been totally lost. And if you are able to laugh at one another's ideas or perceptions of life, like you can get along, but there's no humor anymore. So it just becomes a fight or a static environment where it's one against the other. It's too uncomfortable to converse.
And a lot of people would say like the left can't meme, and they're right. For the most part, they're right. But when both sides get plenty testy when it becomes about serious issues that they really believe in. So it's like both sides do need to learn to be able to laugh. To lighten up.
Right. Yep. And it's a choice, right? They always say, oh, happiness is a choice. Joy is a choice. Like lightening up is a choice. And I'm working really hard on it, because the last 3 years since 2020, since I came out speaking against BLM and COVID and all that stuff, is like I've been in such a survival mode that everything, you know, they say, what's the phrase, like when you only know how to use a hammer,
if all you have is a hammer, everything's
a nail. So to be more particular in approaches, is imperative to how we move forward, right?
I never try to think of those types of sayings on air because I always screw them up.
You did great.
I always screw them up. I've had some doozies.
Every hammer you have is a problem.
Is a problem. Every nail is a solution or something like that. Yes, I would screw that up. So how long do you think it's going to take for a cultural shift in this area? Because it's going to be a long process.
Yeah, it is going to be a long process. But if you've probably noticed, younger children aren't with the program that they're trying to implement because they're in their rebellious phase as it is. And, the nature of growing up from a child into adolescence and adulthood and whatnot. They rebel against what's being pushed upon them. So what's being pushed upon them are the very things that we disagree with fundamentally. So instinctively, they're like, nah, this is weird.
Yeah.
So my son's generation, he's 10. I imagine that will be the one that sort of pushes that stuff off.
It's really the millennials' fault for being too self-important and being too narcissistic. It really is. It's like somebody pointed out to me, they said a lot of people feel like after we legalized gay rights, that there was no great civil rights battles to fight, so now everyone's just making up civil rights battles to fight.
No one was given anything worthwhile to rebel against in the last few generations.
And again, I think that goes back to what we take in visually and storytelling wise. Like, I stopped really watching movies when the movie Congo came out.
Okay, 98 or something like that, right?
Because I watched it and I left. And I don't know if did you ever see La Bamba?
Mm-mm.
Oh my gosh, don't. It's so depressing. My mom didn't prepare me that he dies in the end. But these movies seep into your sensibility, especially when you're young. You know how they say the music you listen to when you're young does something to you when you listen to it as an adult. You have these memories because it's the transition you're going through. It's chemical. So these kids are ingesting things that have no relevance to actual reality, and that's a problem. That's why we have to put the right things into their consciousness.
And to do that, it's going to take, one thing people take for granted is just how much infrastructure Hollywood has built up. So that's true. The hard part is that you're starting from net zero in a lot of ways in that infrastructure, and they are so good at propaganda. I've been watching, they're so good at it. It's unbelievable.
They're so good, but it's also so cringy.
No, but I'm saying they were better at it back in the day.
It's a little bit more subtle.
What it is you point out that they did more good for society in the 90s, in the 80s and 90s, with race relations, implementing characters of different races and ethnicities. Mm-hmm. A lot of times it gets into the argument about whether they're the main character or not, but they did more for those generations. Think about what they were able to do by getting people by stop showing people smoking in movies and television.
Right.
That they made a conscious decision to
not
stop.
Necessarily a good thing though, right?
You guys talked about that on one of the episodes recently, right? About smoking and...
Well, I mentioned that you don't see it in movies and television as much, and I pointed out that in the show Lucifer, you always see him take it, but you never see him actually smoke it. Right. So now when you see somebody smoke a cigarette, it's actually kind of shocking to me.
Yeah.
So they're very good at propaganda.
That are really good dialogue devices, and I think regulating on that was a bad decision.
Yeah.
Plus smoking is better than vaping.
Well, and then that's all they show now is vaping. So I'm kind of shocked with it because I think the number one thing I hear people say is that they get people coming to them behind the scenes. Is this something where it's the people in front of the camera that lean a certain direction? I've heard that people behind the camera tend to be more...
All crew is more conservative.
Of course, because they're blue collar.
Right.
In a lot of ways, right? And the financial people would have been fiscally conservative 20 years ago, but ESG funding, BlackRock, and all of that,
going along with it, so they have a job.
Yeah. So, is this the type of thing where we need more people to get in on the ground level behind the scenes? Not just in front of the camera?
Personally, I think Hollywood as an entity is a black hole that's sinking and going away. It's just so dysfunctional right now with the writer's strike and the way the SAG union operates.
I forget that's going on right now because they're looking for more money to be made for the writers and everything like that.
And after 2007, 2008, there was a strike back then.
I love that one. Some of my favorite work came out at that time. Some of the most disjointed, weird...
Right.
The second Transformers movie, which everyone hates but me, came out as a product of that time period.
But the issue is that actors stopped making as much money. Producers made double the money because all the streaming programs now you weren't.
That was the next thing I was going to ask to say. It's changing the way that people are making their money because they're not selling. They're selling a show to a network, but they're not making residuals now.
Exactly.
Right?
You can't survive on one show anymore. Whereas if it was on a network, it would air again. You get paid the same amount that you got paid for the episode, but now you don't get that second relief.
Those people who in Friends are just making gazillions of dollars every
Probably,
year.
yeah. But then because of all of the platforms that exist, it used to be like, a couple networks, HBO, blah, 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 Start, whatever. Now there's so many online platforms that they need content. They flood the market with quantity rather than quality.
Yeah.
So nothing sticks, and it's a failing system. So my concept and my goal, what I intend to invest my time and energy to, is creating outside of that system. And a lot of people are doing that too. Getting funding on their own, financing on their own, production on their own. We all know how to do it. It's just stepping away from that matrix and creating a new one, which is totally plausible.
Yeah. And it'll take time, but it can be done.
Yeah, and with all the technology that we have right now, like you can shoot a movie on your freaking iPhone.
Yeah, people don't realize, like we were talking earlier about, like, just what was it? We were talking about, like, there was a time when you couldn't just look up anything you wanted on Google, right?
Yeah.
Like one thing that we have, in skating, right? Like there was a time when if you wanted to film a skate video, you had to have a friend who was rich, who had who could afford a 3-chip camera,
right,
and who could afford to do something that shot in film mode that actually had good quality. Now, literally every person walks around with a quality, something in their pocket.
Right.
Like the idea that you used to have to download external Adobe programs to shoot things and to ramp slow motion. Mm-hmm. Now it just comes on your phone. Mm-hmm. So we have the technology now to do stuff like that, and with it more readily available, I think that's already being seen. I think there's plenty of you'll get used to it. I promise. I promise you'll get used to it. I think that the next generation, it's going to be that you're seeing more, like, whether it's Instagram Reels or people on social media, they create very, very funny shorts.
Right.
Very, very funny skits.
Yes.
And that's the type of person, maybe that's just a sign of the times that our attention spans are rot. I know mine is. Like, the stuff that makes me laugh is all done in under a minute nowadays, it feels like. But, born out of those talents who are writing these great short pieces may inspire the next generation of long form writers who will not be hampered to the Hollywood system.
Yeah, well, there are writers who have been ousted from the industry because they're not writing woke. So the pool already exists. They just need the funding to get going. And
I'm always of the opinion that those great writers still exist. It's just that there's just such an need for, the amount of content that's needed to cover all of these streaming services, network television, movies. There's so much stuff being made that they've just had to settle for other writers who are also not as good. Yeah. Right? Like I always point out, the people who wrote the X-Files went on to write Breaking Bad, went on to write Better Call Saul, all still working. Mm-hmm. But it's just that there's also 10,000 other series that are being made that nobody's watching.
Well, now they have rules that you have to hire diverse and it to be equitable on your writing staff.
Tax breaks in California.
And they're allowing you to use ChatGPT to write scripts now.
Yep. To aid in script writing.
That's crazy.
Yeah. They're not going to be able to stop them from
There's
that.
Zero artistic integrity in that.
Yeah.
So if you have a piece of advice for anybody who wants to get in and work outside of the industry, if they don't want to go to Hollywood, is there advice you could give to people that are looking to do that? Because we get people who reach out all the time who they want to be writers. Yeah. They want to pitch here. Like Tim is a very inspirational person. People want to pitch ideas to him because they're motivated by his vision. Yeah. Is there advice that you would give to people to get them into
that's definitely the first part of the approach is reaching out and networking with like-minded people. Yeah. I would say, start a project, no matter how small it is, so that you have something to show, and then develop your craft and process, because you learn along the way, and we'll be able to provide a product to someone when you're also trying to share your vision. Yeah. But it is important for people like Tim to help support that industry, and I know he is currently. But do something. Just start doing something. I think there's an element that we often ignore, especially because everyone's on social media and everything feels so permanent in terms of if you post something I'm going to take this down. We have to be willing to be cringy, because that's one thing that I definitely noticed, that people in Hollywood who have had success, there's an element of just not caring how cringy they look, and they push through barriers of their own making because of it to break to the next level. It's all the inspirational infographics that talk about talk about being willing to make a fool of yourself to be able to push through. Yeah. And that applies to absolutely everything. Standing up for what you believe in, and I'm just going to assume like that means they like what we're talking
It is.
about.
It means they're loving it.
So then they just start throwing hundreds at us?
Yeah, basically.
Very cool.
20s and hundreds.
Okay.
Yeah. I am going to have to ask this question. Do you have this is a very, very fanboy question. Do you have a favorite role that you've done?
The Mentalist.
The Mentalist. Okay. I made it a point. I was telling Mary about this story before the show, and I talked to you about it. I said, that role, if you guys have never seen The Mentalist, it was on CBS, I think, from 2008 to 2013 or something like that. Starred Simon Baker and Robert Dooney.
Is either CBS or ABC.
It was one of those two. Mary, there's a $20 one right there.
This is from Hobbit. I appreciate the point earlier on the lack of humor in comedy. As a conservative Christian guy, I often feel somber, angry, and depressed when I see the culture war around us, forgetting the power of humor in comedy.
Yes.
I've just learned to laugh at all of it.
Good for you.
Even the things that do bother me, I can laugh at now because you take a lot of the power away from the pain of it if you learn to laugh at it.
Right.
So, okay. So what I was saying is like that show starred Simon Baker, Robin Tooney, Owain Yeoman, and Amanda Rigetti and Tim Kang, who you worked with extensively on that show. And what I was pointing out is that, okay, your role was as a character named Summer Edgecombe, right?
Yeah.
Do you want to explain what the character was?
Yes. So she was a hooker with a heart of gold, turned informant, turned drug addict, turned love interest, and then just a junkie that had to be sent away.
Yes.
It was quite a character
Brett,
arc.
the shot's on me.
Is it? Oh, it got stuck. Okay, there's okay. One more time. I'm doing Serge's job as well today. So so she started off as a hooker with a heart of gold.
With a heart of gold, a likable hooker, it has to be, and hired as an informant. I mean, it was just a great arc because usually you get on shows and you're that character, but to have a journey was such a pleasure and really didn't happen in very, very many other projects that I had.
And what I was explaining was, as somebody who loves network television, I have a soft spot for the 24-episode seasons where they had to learn how to tell a good story in 45 minutes that didn't have to be 16 episodes and you had to pay attention through the whole thing. You learned to tell a good story and be done by the end of it, and you could feel satisfied when it was done, right?
But then you also had the layers that continued on that if you watched, you were, as a fan.
So for me, that character is the perfect example of what a recurring guest character is supposed to do. They're supposed to take a main character who only tends to interact with people in certain environments because the structure of the story demands it, whether it's because he's a cop, he only interacts with other cops, he's a lawyer, he only interacts with other lawyers in his family. A good guest character can take that character out of their environment and help flesh it out to new territories, and that's exactly what that character did on that show.
Tim actually smiled for the first, he never smiled in any of the seasons until then. And I will say, as a fellow professional actor, which he was, he reached out to me before I started filming, and he took me out to lunch, and he picked me up too, which was like, okay. And we went to lunch, and it was completely just a kind professional. I've never experienced that. And he was actually fairly new in his career at the time.
So he's clearly proven himself to be a professional.
He is a solid professional.
That is awesome.
Yeah, he's a great person.
That is that's one of those roles that every time, because I rewatch that show, like a lot of those shows, those are some of my favorites, is shows like that I can rewatch, and whenever that arc comes up, it's memorable.
Yeah.
Have you had a lot of negative encounters in the business?
Yeah, I've had a few. Yes, absolutely. They usually occur in the makeup trailer. That seems that seems to be the most what's the word? Insecure place for actors to congregate. And I actually walked into a trailer once, seeing an actress that I had worked with before, and I was like, "Oh, you're on the show," and she was like, "This is my show." I was like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I don't watch your show." It's good to see you. I actually called her out on it later when she was a friend of mine, and she was like, I just was so insecure because of the way I was treated on this previous project that we had all worked on, and I wasn't a part of that, but it shows up, these,
but you never know the reason that somebody lashes out.
She eventually told me was because the other project, but it's an uncomfortable. Imagine always being the new guy at school, and that's, you're like, I might not have a job in a week. I don't know really what's going on. I don't even know how I got here because it's such a lottery getting this job. Like, I didn't do anything different the day before on a different audition than this one that I actually booked. So there's no logic involved. So you're just like flying atoms of confusion.
I wonder if that speaks to a lot of the confusion for people in that industry when it comes to issues outside of Hollywood, is that like, look, the rest of the world might not be that wishy-washy.
It's not.
It's not.
Yeah, it's not.
Right? So,
and I think people, when they eventually take control of their careers, they create their own projects with their own production companies, that's when you feel like actual stability. But that doesn't happen often.
Are you excited for the future?
I am excited because, I feel like we went through this apocalyptic threshold, right? When COVID, 9/11. Yeah, that too.
That's technically that too, yes.
Well, actually, yes, absolutely. Yeah. But, you live by these rules growing up. I was, let's say, I turned 40 when COVID, right before COVID, or maybe in the middle, I don't know. I'm 42, so math, whatever. But I had all these years of life thinking, I need to be stressed about this. I'm supposed to be here in my future, and I did this to this person. I have to rectify that situation. You have all these rules of why you should be burdened with your consciousness. And then when the apocalypse happened, which I always thought would happen at some point. So first I was like, oh, wow, it's really here. Did I make it happen? This whole like...
It's like the meme of the guy when he's like, he shoots the ruler or the thing, and it's like he looks at his hand like he's Spider-Man. Like,
right, totally.
Yeah.
So, but when it happened, I was like, oh, all of these things are totally insignificant. Yeah. And which is scary because you're like, so then what is? And you've got this assault on reality from this massive conglomerate of organizations in the New World Order, all this stuff. And you're like, what matters anymore? And if and this is something that is relatively new to me, is like, okay, I ran for mayor because I really wanted to fight to stop the UN agenda in my little city, which is happening. Yeah. And okay, that's a brick wall. Politics is so corrupt. Carrie Lake lost. I literally cried. And I felt so demoralized. But so I really looked inside to see, okay, what do I have within my wheelhouse to fight what's going on? Oh my God, well, why would I leave the very thing that I invested, all of my life into? This is how I'm going to push forward where I can help change the trajectory, possibly. Yeah. A little, I talked to Dallas Sonia, and he's like, the way I look at this moment in time is that everyone is Sarah Connor in Terminator, and this fight isn't going to necessarily affect us in a positive way, but it'll affect our children's children in a positive way. I was like, that's beautiful and really depressing, that idea. But I do feel like there's always room for divine intervention, and I'm really hoping for that grace to allow us to get the humor back, because that'll change everything. But then people are waking up. Yeah. People are over the assault of constant fear overload. And, I have a friend whose mom was totally indoctrinated. Her TV broke, and she didn't have it for like a few months. And then she called her daughter and was like, I think there might be something to the... Yeah. And she's like, my friend was like, why are you thinking? She goes, I haven't been watching CNN or anything. Yeah.
Turn off the TV for a while goes a long way.
And you recalibrate what's inside my circle of influence and my circle of control.
Yes, and what if I heard that actually made me think about something? Yeah. And it's... that's the moment of divine intervention, though. Yeah. Her TV broke, so she was saved.
It's the memes that people make about blocking Fox or CNN on their parents' televisions.
Right.
Like Smash your parents' TV. Yeah. They can't stop watching CNN.
Right.
That's all you have to do. Just take your parents' TV out, be like, go over there and be like, pretend to be cleaning, be like, whoops, I dropped your flat screen TV
always like,
on the ground.
It's that damn phone, but then for them, it's that damn TV.
Yes, totally.
Yeah. It's crazy. So it's if you guys are ready, we will get right into it. That's actually like a really bright spot to end it on that part of the discussion.
Feels happy.
I like happy. Like that's one of the hardest parts I have with disconnecting from loving old Hollywood is that it was so good at pulling emotions out of you, and they're so good at it. Like that's the thing. There's plenty of cringe out there, but when they do it right, they do it right.
Yes.
I haven't cried at a movie in I don't know when the last one was, but it could have happened at Top Gun Maverick.
I was just gonna say, you didn't cry at Top Gun?
Like when he's on the bike and he gets the girl and there's a love ballad playing. I'm like, is it 1984? What year is it? I don't even know. But like they, when they want to do it, they can do it.
Yes, and we needed that so desperately. That's why I wish, while Terror on the Prairie was awesome, I kind of wish we had a movie that was a little... I mean, there's a great story and it is uplifting, but...
You're going to have to get Tom Cruise on a motorcycle.
Something more like sweet.
Yes.
Syrupy
like
sweet.
you and you're like, yes, America, I love being here. I love being.
Thanks for watching. Listen to full episodes of Pop Culture Crisis on Spotify.
Keep up with us on social media and make sure you subscribe and ring that bell so you never miss the show. Bye, guys.